Hello, welcome back to Mapping Hour. This is episode 5, and the whole team is here, ready to rock and roll. And let's see if I can share my screen and make sure that we've got all of the elements ready in place for everybody. Once again, you can reach us at mappinghour@esri.com. And you can find all kinds of information. If this is your first time to see this, you can see us at esriurl.com/mappinghour. Reminder that you're going to need a login. You can use any org-based login, or if you don't have a login and you need a temporary one, you can find it by going to esriurl.com/mappinghour and filling out the survey there. Last time, we were working through map viewer presentations and scene viewer slides. That was really fun. And saving content created by other people or that you built, and then sharing that content, getting a short URL and taking a quick peek into what we're going to be looking at today. Last time, looking at the item details. This session will be focusing on metadata. Metadata and URLs, item IDs, item pages, tags, searching in groups. This is important stuff for making sure that the whole big infrastructure of ArcGIS Online works well and people get to learn from it and benefit from it. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who's going to get us started. And Tom, if you're ready, jump on in.
Thanks, Charlie. What we're going to do is take a quick look at some metadata properties on typical GeoInquiry maps. At this point, hopefully everybody's comfortable with the idea that a GeoInquiry has both a PDF document as well as a map attached to it. And to get to my map, as per usual, I'm going to click through on my blue bar in this case, and launch the map. And here's my map of climate change. Now this activity, as you may have noticed, is in the Earth Science collection. And what we really want to do is investigate a little bit about this map, investigate through its metadata a little bit more. And you'll notice, as we did with the last episode, when you're on a map, you can press that About button, learn a little bit about the map through its summary that's posted here. You can find out a little bit about when the map was created, as well as the More Details link. So when you click that More Details link, of course, you actually end up on the items page. Now, this is the item page for this map. And as we looked at it before, you'll notice that there is a summary near the top here. There is a description. Both of these, including its title, are useful for helping describe what is in that map. They're also used, particularly the description, to help identify the sources of data, as well as what has happened to the map in terms of who has created it and who has altered it over time. This helps a map user, other than yourself, for example, understand the map lineage and its data sources. In addition, of course, the details page includes the creator, and one of my colleagues will be discussing a bit more about the owners or creators that are attached to items inside of ArcGIS Online. And of course, on maps and features or data layers, as we scroll down, we see the contents, in this case, of the map. We see the layers within the map. If we keep scrolling, we can also see things like terms of use, and on the right column, we can tell who actually holds the licensing on that particular set of data. So the item details page provides a lot of useful information to us about who created the data, maybe why they created it, and what has changed about the data or the map over time. We also learn a little bit about the creator, owner, and its terms of use. Let's take a closer look at one of the layers in this map. And we can do that by scrolling down to the layers list. And in this case, perhaps we'll look at, let's just look at one of the temperature anomaly layers that's included in this map. So the item page is now loaded, and this time we're not looking at an item page for a map, but rather we're looking at an item page for a data layer. You'll notice there's a lot of similarity, a title, a summary, and a description. We can also see owner and creation dates. And like before, as we scroll down, we can see terms of use and tags and some of these other elements included in the items page. Now on the items page, whether you're looking at an item page for a map or a data layer or any other type of object in ArcGIS Online, it's important to note that in the URL of your browser, each item in ArcGIS Online has a unique, what we call alphanumeric or numbers and letters string. This string identifies the map or the data layer uniquely inside of ArcGIS Online. And if you know that alphanumeric string, you can always uniquely identify an object inside of ArcGIS Online. So, if we own a data layer, in this case, you'll notice I am not logged in, but I'm looking at the item page for a layer. If we own it, we have a few other options available to us. You'll notice that in this new browser window, I'm actually logged in as the item's owner. So I am logged in this case, as the account name, Esri_Tess, which you can see down here in our owner. Now, as the owner of this particular item, I still have the overview page, which is largely publicly viewable, but I've also got access to usage statistics. And as I keep scrolling or keep clicking rather, and I go to my summaries tab, I have some additional options that I can explore around this particular item. And one that is useful to keep an eye on is the ability to mark data or maps with preferences for making them either authoritative or even deprecated. You'll also notice that on the settings tab, we have the option to prevent an item from being accidentally deleted. If you've got data or your students have data that's very valuable, or something you just don't want to accidentally lose, check that box and you'll save it to update the item. This holds true for maps and data alike across ArcGIS Online. I think with that, we'll turn it over to Joseph.
Thank you, Tom. Much appreciated. All right, folks. In the last hour, we created a presentation from an ArcGIS Online map. And that's what I've got right here. It's the upper elementary geoinquiries that we saved into our own, in my case, my own ArcGIS Online account. And just as a reminder, this comes up a lot in workshops and classes and so on that our team has worked with over the years. So people are still wondering, am I overwriting the original person's map? No, you can't overwrite someone else's map. So you're saving it into your own organization, and then you can make changes, and ditto for your students or your kids if you're a parent teaching this. So just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that. I've saved a copy of one of our favorite topics, what's not to love about watersheds, and I can make changes to it. I've also made a presentation out of it, and so what we're going to do in this section is we're going to build on what Tom was working with you all on in terms of metadata, sharing, and a little bit, just getting a little bit deeper into the swimming pool, but not too deep. Okay, first of all, we want to open our presentation. Remember that the presentation is a way for you and your students to present content, zoom around to different parts of the map, display different layers, and so on. And so inside the map, if you've created such a thing, you'll see in the upper right an edit presentation. Remember, the presentation is actually stored inside the map, and we'll reinforce that here in a small a few minutes. So if I want to edit this presentation, I'm going to go ahead and say, I've already saved this, so I'm good to go. And all I want to do is add some data to the map and then edit the presentation. So just as a refresher, I've got 2 different slides in here. Slides is kind of a loose term. They're not really static, as you know. They're investigative tools. We can zoom and pan and do some investigation with these. So I've got these 2 things inside there. Remember the USA watersheds and then Colorado watersheds with a bit of additional data in it. So you can switch back and forth between the presentation and the map quite simply. If you're in the presentation mode, you can see Edit Map up in the upper right. If you're in the map mode, you see Edit Presentation. So it's a toggle back and forth. And what Kylie's going to get into a little bit later on is this whole idea of you're going to have a lot of tabs. And so sometimes when you're working inside ArcGIS Online, it opens a new tab. Sometimes it keeps the same tab. So it's understanding tabs is actually a good thing to teach, and it's a good way of doing that inside these mapping tools. You will have a lot of tabs, as you can see all of our screens during the mapping hour. Okay, so now I'm back on the map. And remember, I can add now, because I've saved this into my own organizational account, I can add data to it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video so you don't see my big fingers here at the moment. I'm going to stop video. There we go. Now, let me go ahead and search for layers here. Now, just as a reminder, the default oftentimes is this My Own Content. So it's going to look in your own organizational account and your content first. But I want to go out to ArcGIS Online. It's a vast storehouse of information. One of my favorite things in here is something called World Hydro. World Hydro. It's, as the name implies, a hydrography or a river kind of a data layer. And as we'll get into here in future mapping hours, but I think we've already touched on it a bit, you've got a lot of different layers in here. Who are all these people? I'm going to touch on this in a bit. But one of the predefined layers that I've used many times in the past, and therefore I'm familiar with it, and Kylie mentioned it in the last mapping hour, I've got some content in here from Esri. So the Esri Hydro Reference Overlay. I'm going to go ahead and just hit the plus sign, and I'm going to add that in. Now, why do I want to do that? Because now I've got, let me turn off the hydro reference overlay and the watershed boundaries. If I zoom out a tad bit and then get this hydro on here, look, I've just got the Amazon, the Mississippi, the Ohio. What a great teaching resource. So instantly I've got a decent map with rivers on it, major rivers. And as you know, a lot of these layers are scale dependent. So if I zoom in, I get more detail. Well, we could spend the rest of the time just drooling over these rivers, right? But we need to move on. I'm going to change the base map, though, real fast into terrain with labels, because my objective in this particular lesson is to have students understand the relationship between elevation, watersheds, and rivers. Okay, so now I've got that hydro reference overlay in there. Very nice. So now I'm going to go back to the presentation and go ahead and save this map. Sure. I've added some data to the map, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now I'm going to go back to Edit Presentation, and I'm going to add one more slide into it. Now, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because as you go through workflows in class, you're teaching and you're instructing and students are presenting and they're digging into these maps and these data sets. This is a typical thing, right? The bell rings, right? The next day you come back into class and you need to go back into your content and you need to go back into your maps. So as you do this time after time, you're going to get very familiar with, okay, going back to the presentation, going back to the map. And that's why we're doing it here in the mapping hour. Okay, let's go ahead and add a slide, and I'm going to call this the rivers. Ooh, okay. And I've got the hydro reference overlay. I've also got the watershed boundaries, but I don't want to have that. I just want this one to be rivers. Okay. And I'm going to set to current. That's fine in the interest of time here. And the base map, I want that terrain with labels. Ooh, okay. Let's go ahead and maybe zoom in right here. Set to current. And now let me go ahead and look at the slide list here. Oh, and as Charlie was explaining the other day, maybe you want to alter the order of these things. So I could do that. I think I'm going to leave it alone right now. I'm going to go ahead and save this presentation now, and let's go ahead and play this. Okay, now we should have 3 things in our presentation, correct, folks? We've got the USA watersheds there, and I've got the rivers, ooh, that layer I just added, and then what I did last hour, the Colorado watersheds. Now, why is it replaying? Why is it doing that? Well, remember, I have this set to, remember this options, auto advanced. If I don't want that anymore, I'll just say none here. Okay, so the point is we've gone in and we've changed the map, and we've also changed the presentation. Great. Now, what do we want to do next? What we want to do next is we want to build on what Tom was going through with you all, and that is the metadata. Ooh, okay. So if we go back to content here, ooh, I've got some unsaved changes. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Okay, great. Now I'm going to go into, and this is where we're going to get you folks nudged into paying attention to the URL that's up here. This is my organizational account, k12.maps.arcgis.com. More about that later from my colleagues here. But the important thing for this segment is let's take a look at this item. So right now I only have one thing in my organizational account, and that is this web map. Hey, Joseph, where is the presentation? Remember, the presentation is part of the map, so you don't have another content item. You don't have another line here with the presentation. Now, later on, we'll build story maps, and we'll put tables in here, so you'll have additional things in here, but this is part of the metadata. So now let's say we want to go in here, and we want to look at the metadata page for this map item. In this case, it's a web map. So let's say I can edit the title, I can edit this summary. I'm going to go ahead and edit the details here. And I've got a little text file here with some content that I want to add to this part of the metadata. So now, Tom mentioned, I think, something that was really important, and that is the lineage. It's part of the metadata. And the lineage helps you understand the process that the maps went through. Now, folks, don't write your master's thesis in here, okay? You don't need to write tons of text. But in this case, maybe I want to figure out, yeah, okay, I created this back then, and I've revised it today, and I've got this presentation here. That's all I'm going to put for right now. That's fine for my purposes. Okay, so another reason why we wanted to mention the metadata is that you have, for those of you that are interested in and are participating in the map competition, the K-12 map competition, this is part of the requirements. And the reason why is not to give you busy work, it's because metadata matters. If you want to find your own stuff, you're not going to name everything map 1, map 2, map 3, and you're going to put a little bit of content in here is what we're trying to stress and share with you all. All right, so the presentation is stored with the map. That's a little bit about the metadata. And then let's pay attention to another component of the metadata, and that is this owner that Kylie was introducing the other day in the mapping hour. Who is the owner of this? Okay, well, if you click on any map author, any content author, you're going to get a profile page. And this is another actual component of the metadata. Remember, Kylie the other day was saying, well, I'm going to go to some ESRI content. And we've all got, Charlie mentioned Bernie Sokolsky. So oftentimes we go to authors that we know are putting out good content. And as you work in this ArcGIS Online environment, you'll get to know some people. That's an important part of GIS, is the networking of people. So in this case, I've got some content in here so that if someone had no idea who I was, and that's pretty much most people in the world, who's Joseph anyway? Okay, this doesn't say that all my content is perfect, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of, okay, I'm a geographer, I'm an educator, I work for ESRI, this is what I've done in the past, etc. Okay, so a little bit of that in there, I think, is helpful. The other thing that we wanted to point out in here is the visibility. Let me scoot a couple things across here. I'm going to actually go to the content area, and then I'm going to go to my own zone here. So I'm going to go in the upper right here is my own profile settings and so on. So let's go ahead and just look at that ever so briefly, folks. Hope you're having fun doing this. Okay, let me scroll down here. You just looked at my profile, a little bit about what I've done, etc. But one of the things that we wanted to point out here is that who can see your profile? In the case of schools, we really advise people to share it with the organization. You don't need to share it with everyone. Share it with the organization so that your students know that you put out content and you're the instructor and you work with other instructors in your school, for example. So you're sharing it with the organization. More about that later, but the profile visibility is an important note that we wanted to share right here. And these are the groups that I belong to. More about that later, okay? Now, couple last things here. I wanted to show you okay. Inside ArcGIS Online, there's loads of content. And I've been looking for tornadoes, let's say. Okay, so I see a bunch of stuff in here. NOAA, okay, I've heard of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That may lend a little bit of credibility. But for example, this NWS-CYS NOAA or James Newton, well, who's James Newton? If I look at James Newton, there's nothing that James Newton has listed. You see this profile here? There's no additional information. So this is part of your decision-making process of, okay, obviously James likes tornadoes and has made some maps, but can I trust them? This is, again, there's no blanket statement, yes or no. This is just another element for you to use in your assessment of looking at data. Last little bits, we will talk more about this in future mapping hours, but we have a whole body of content called the Living Atlas of the World. Ooh, the Living Atlas of the World. It's as marvelous as the phrase sounds. But in here, we have current weather and wind station data. Actually, Charlie showed this on the very first mapping hour. Hey, I can look at what the weather's like because we've got these live feeds coming in. And if I take a look at that feature layer and take a look at the metadata in there, this is just another example of a metadata page where the Living Atlas, one of the appeals of it is it has a lot of rich content in terms of layers, maps, and so on. But it also has decent metadata in it. So you can use that to decide, wow, these are the sources for the ocean buoys and the weather stations, and this is the area covered. So there's quite a bit of metadata, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about the Living Atlas later on. But that's just a couple of examples of maybe good data, good metadata, not so good metadata, okay? And that's all I wanted to share for right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Joseph. That was great. So I want to expand a little bit on what some of the things that Joseph was talking about, and Tom, and we're just going to keep building this a little bit. So one of the things that both of them was talking about was the value of metadata for communicating about your data. And they talked a few times about evaluating your sources and things like that. There's another aspect to metadata that I want to go into a little bit more, and that's on finding content. Right? So when we were using things before, you saw, Joseph mentioned it a little bit, like there's the owner and how I searched on that before. Well, I could search on it because it's part of the metadata. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can look at some of these concepts. All right, so right now we're back on one of those item pages that you've seen a number of times today. And this is the metadata of the page. And I'm going to focus on one part of it that wasn't talked about that actually plays a pretty big part in search. So the one part that wasn't covered in too much, we saw it a little bit, is down here you can see that there are tags for this metadata. Now, when you create your content in ArcGIS Online, you can save it in folders and you can organize your stuff. This is helpful. At home, I don't want everything everywhere. I need to know my socks are in my sock drawer, right? Organization helps us find what we need. And we all have our own ways of doing that. Everyone has their own structure. Everyone has their own right way to set up their folders on their hard drive, for example. So we have folders and we can organize our content in them, and that's great. But another way we can organize our content is with tags. And so we're going to go ahead and see how we can use those here. Now with tags, I can edit them, and I can remove a tag that's already there. I could add an additional one. For example, this map is about color, so perhaps I want to add that tag. And I can add it, and it saves for me. So great, I can add some tags, and this is adding to that metadata. And I'll talk a little bit more about why those tags are really cool in just a second. But before I get into that, I want to show you there's also another time that you have the opportunity to add these tags. And that's when you're working in the map itself. Now, in the last episode, we did a lot of save as, right? We talked about taking someone else's content, making it your own. And I'm going to return to that same dialogue. Now, save won't give me anything too useful because this is already my map. I can already control the metadata, but if I do save as, I'm going to be shown some of that metadata that I can go ahead and edit. And again, tags are one of the things. They're important enough that they're right here. That description we looked at is also important, but it's not here. I don't have to have one when I'm creating my content. Tags are really key for the search experience, both for your own data and for finding that of others. So that's why they're going to come a little bit front and center here. All right, so now we see kind of how we can add our tags. I want to show you a couple of reasons why they're pretty important. And the first one, I'm going to go ahead and go to our hub page for this series of episodes. So this is Mapping Hour, right? And you've seen links for the Mapping Hour hub page. And I know you haven't really seen it a ton yet, and you're going to be able to go and play with it all you want. But one of the things that Hub does as an Esri product is use tags. And so this hub is tied to a particular group. And we'll get into groups in a minute, so just bear with me on that. But it's tied to a group, and within that group, we can use tags to do different things. For example, with our episodes, you can see a link to get resources that we talked about during that. That's great. You didn't get all the URLs written down. Well, look, you can get to them all in one place here. Now, Joseph also mentioned tabs, and you notice I use tabs a lot when I present. The things I'm going to talk about, they're right up here at the top. And this is a great example of one way I do it. I'm going to just show you a trick. Some of you already know this because it's just browser functionality. But you can right-click and choose that you want it to open in a new tab. I like that because I don't want to forget what page I was on. Now, in this case, I actually already did it. So you'll see I have two of the same tabs next right here. That's okay. So we're going to go on in, and as this one loads up, we'll see the content that was part of that search. Now, in this case, actually, I have two different ones. I have episode 1 and 2. That's okay. They're just different categories and different tags that were used here. And you can see that by expanding the tags. You can see the different tags available in this search. You can see this is a search done in the hub right here using that search box. Now, if I wanted to change and look at episode 2, I could do so right here. I could change the search string I'm using, and that would give us our other item. All right. So in here, again, we have our different tags that we can use. So in hubs, our tags are used as part of our categorization. And so you're going to use that when you're working in the content. For example, if you want to find something that you saw in episode 2, try searching on the tag, because we're trying to be really good about using tags that are going to be useful for you. All right, I'm going to jump on over here now to another organization. And in this organization, I'm going to do a search. And this is why tags are important, right? Because it's something we can use in our search. And in the search, there's a couple different things we can do. So first, I'm just going to find some search results in here. Now, I've been doing a lot of blogs right now while we're at home, and I'm doing fun GIS projects with my kids to help get them interested in what I do. And I've been trying to use a consistent tag. I know I've missed it a few times, but in general, it's there. So I'm going to use my tag of GIS with kids to remind myself what I've already done and already played with. And I can go ahead and see, in this case, it's pretty much going to be my content because that's a pretty specific tag. Now, I can see a bunch of these results, and I could dive in and pick one that's from this series that I've been working on. So when you're doing this search, I'm going to just open one of these right now. And again, I'm using that trick of opening it in a new tab. So if I want to come back here, I easily can. And we're going to look at the item page. And you can see I'm not the best at the metadata here. That's okay. I can always go in and fill it out later when I'm ready to use these items. But if you look down here, you can see the tags. And in this case, that search term I did, GIS with kids, is pretty specific. So that was hitting the tag, and that's why that result got returned. It's important to understand in your ArcGIS content, other fields are also going to be used in this search. So it's not just the tags that I'm returning. As Joseph mentioned, you have good names, right? You didn't name them map 1, map 2, map 3, because then you wouldn't be able to find them. So for example, if I was to search on detectives, I would find the same result because my search is going to check the title. It's going to check the summary or that short blurb that you entered as you were creating the item. It's also going to be searching in the description as well as the tags. So that's great. There's a number of things this search will take into account. And you may remember the first day when we did a search, I said, just trust me for now. We're going to say owner : and write some stuff after it. That was a special way to do search. What that does, that notation we call it, when you have a special way of writing it, says in the owner, I need this value. And so, for example, if I wanted to make sure again that I'm finding in this search, I just want to look at my own content, I could type in my username here. And now with my search, I'll find all of my content that I have in this organization. So even though we don't think of that as a key searchable field, we can even make sure we say No, I don't care if someone for some reason typed Kylie_Esri ed in the description. I only care if it's the owner. And this is going to speak also to that authoritative sources thing Joseph was mentioning. And what we've been emphasizing throughout this series, which is you have to know your data and you have to trust it. And part of trusting that data is knowing where it comes from and who made it. It's like when you had your students do maybe a literature review. Now, if they find a blog from Sally Joe that is available on Google, is that going to have the same authoritative value as something found on perhaps a news site, perhaps a known organization that specializes in an area, the content that they've provided? It's not, and it's the same with the owners of content in here. We know that Esri produces content. You've heard Byrne's name. He has some great content. Those of us in this session have done a number of pieces of content that you may find useful. And so you'll be able to search for those things, see the authoritativeness, and make your decisions based on that. Now, this is one type of search that you can do in ArcGIS Online. And in it, you can actually find a bunch of different types of content. And in this search, for example, in this one, I have 62 results. Maybe I remembered, I know I made content, but I don't remember what word I used. What did I call it? I sometimes have different favorite words depending on what I'm in the mood for, but I know it was a map. Well, I can help myself find the right thing by filtering down these results. Now, we talked about filter in the context of the map the other day, right? Do you remember we did that exercise where if we have people raise their hands, that's a selection, you can see everything, but you know which ones fit those attributes. And then if we filter, it's like everything else goes away, like go leave the room if you're not a lefty. It's the same here. Right now I have 62 results. If I say, I really only care about layers, wow, I'm down to 21. So I know that thing I made was a layer. And now as I scroll through to find the particular item I'm thinking of, I have a lot less I need to read through to find it. All over here are a bunch of different filters you can use. And you may remember one here, right? Tags that we started talking about. I can come in here and use those to filter. Oh, I did a blog about this. Well, let's go ahead and look. Well, I don't have any layers I created just for a blog. Now I can delete that filter and just see the other. So here are some ways that you can work with your content to take a search you've done and really make sure that you're finding the right content and also that it's authoritative, that you trust it, that you want to bring it in. When we talk about bring it again, I'm going to go ahead and show you another place that you can do some searches. So I'm going to jump over a few tabs here, and now we're in the map. We've seen this map in other episodes. I really like the colors. It's been a lot of fun for me lately. But what if I want to do a blog that combines these colors with something else? I'm sure Joseph would come up with a cool scenario where I wanted to take colors and overlay it with different data and what I was going to learn about one part of our country, right? We have some great ideas of what we can learn from this geographic data. Just having it isn't enough. So to do that, though, I would have to add the other layer in. So if we go ahead in here and add, and I'm going to search for layers. You may remember this search as you've seen it before. But if I start typing and say I wanted to bring some information about population density in to maybe explain why different areas have more colors placed there than other areas. Because if we zoom in, we can see that, right? When we're looking at the US, there aren't so many colors here. We look over at Los Angeles, there's sure a lot there. Does population density play a part in that? So let's add that to our map. So I'm going to go ahead and search for population density. And I get no results. It's because of some of the filters that I have set. So at the top here is how you're going to filter when you're in the map. Right now I'm only looking in my content. And population density is not my area of expertise. I don't create a lot of layers for that at all. So I would need to check somewhere else. You have a lot of choices in here. Perhaps I'd found it before and made it a favorite. Perhaps it was a group, or I know it's in my organization. Joseph mentioned the Living Atlas. That has a great curated set of data. And in there, it's curated. That's really key because you know there's a little bit of authority coming to it. It's not just anyone throwing what they want in there. There are people watching what goes in, making sure it's good for you to use. Or you could search all of ArcGIS Online. You could say, you know, this is kind of informal. I'm not concerned with how authoritative the data source is. I can look at the metadata and decide for myself if it's the right source. So we'll go ahead and pick that option for now. Oh geez, 5,004 layers. I'm going to have to narrow this down. And you may remember that keyword that I was talking about earlier and that we used last time we did this search. I know Esri has a data source about this population density, and I trust those sources. So I'm going to go ahead and filter that by that, and I get a much more manageable list. So I can find the right information that I want to add into my map. All right, I'm going to jump backwards a little bit now, because there's one more key thing you should understand with search, and I find it easier to explain when looking at the results. And that's something that Tom mentioned a bit earlier about the URL. So he talked about how there's an item ID or that alphanumeric string in the URL. Now, in your search results, you can use that. In this case, when I'm searching in my own org, it's not quite as important. But if I can hover here, you'll see at the bottom, down in this left corner, the URL appears. Or in this case, I'm going to go ahead and open it in a new tab so we can just see the URL easily at the top of the browser. Go ahead and highlight it for you so you guys can see what I'm looking at. And I'm going to just emphasize some pieces here. So in addition to the item ID, which is that unique identifier that's going to be for this content throughout all of ArcGIS Online, you can see at the start of the URL, it says edresources.maps. What that means is this organization, edresources, has provided this content. So you can get a hint from that URL about where this item is coming from. And again, that's going to help you evaluate the sources that you're finding through your searches. I'm going to jump backwards again and find one of our other tabs. In this case, it's the search, but you can see at the start of this URL something a little different. And the reason I'm going to talk about this one is so you can just understand how this stuff works a little bit. So in this one, instead of seeing an organization name.maps, what you see is actually an organization name.hub and with some other information before it. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Hub, what it is it's a way to take all the stuff that you've created and create focused areas of it for specific audiences. In this case, we took content that's in the K-12 org and we made a mapping hour hub so that we could make sure that you guys are seeing the right content and information as you go through this series. So the hub's allowing us to do that. It's not the entire org. It's our special set just for you guys. And you can see that in some of these URLs. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit about the URLs, how tags are really going to help you with search, not to mention the fact that your metadata has to rock, so people know if they can take your content and use it as well. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie.
What a great introduction this has been for looking at all of the information that is hidden, but it's there and it's influencing the way that we're interacting with ArcGIS Online. The fact that there's all of these elements that you can go in and investigate is really important, because when you start sharing content or you're looking at other content that other folks are sharing with you, it helps you really understand, yep, this is the stuff that I want to work with. I'm going to set these other things off to the side. I need to make sure that people who are in this group will be able to find the things that I want. Knowing how you search things can help you think backwards from that and say, if other people are going to be searching for this too, I got to make sure that I have the tags, that I'm labeling things properly, that I've got my own profile set up in a way that is going to be sensible for people to say, ooh, there's somebody who has been working with ArcGIS Online and knows what they're doing with it. So it's really important that you get to be comfortable with all of the information that exists here. Joseph talked a couple of sessions ago about the Geographic Information System. This is really a system that you're working with this information here. And it's that system that helps all of us find things, keep them organized. Boy, when I was a kid and when I was growing up, even in high school, I couldn't make sense of the world. It didn't make sense in my head. And it was not until I got into college and was taking some geography classes and I started recognizing, wow, there are patterns. I can understand how to find things. I can understand how one thing relates to another. It's these systems that make all of the information that everybody is working on able to be used to solve problems. We've got small little problems that we're dealing with. I want to put together a lesson for today I want to deal with a whole group of students inside my organization. So that brings me to thinking about, let me share my screen here. I want to call up my browser to walk through a little bit of thinking about your organization. This is a document that is a really useful document for people who are trying to understand this thing called an organization, an ArcGIS online organization. It has a lot of information here for the people who are the real managers of the organization. But it really helps also to understand some things for the people who are just users of the organization who want to say, how does it work? How do I use what I get to do better? And so it walks through how do I think about GIS and teaching, and about ArcGIS Online and teaching, and an organization and teaching. And then what does it take to create and use and run an organization? So it's walking through in kind of bulleted fashion. What are the high points about this? What your organization can be. Here's an example org, k12.maps.arcgis.com. Hey, that's the org that we're in, that we're using for this mapping our process. And how is an org constructed? This I saw presented when organizations first came out, and it was presented by one of the heads of Esri Technology, and he's made it so simple. I couldn't wrap my head around it, and he said, an org is very simple. There are three things in an organization. There are people. People make items. And there are groups that contain items and people. Three things in an org: people, items, and groups. It's very, very systematically organized. Now, these groups have been mentioned today because you can share things within a group. Now, you can also share to the public, but does every homework assignment that every student has ever made need to be shared with the whole world? Kylie was talking about searching. If everything gets shared with the world and I go out looking for something, I'm going to have to deal with all kinds of debris out there. So maybe not everything needs to be shared with the organization. Sorry, with the world. How about with the organization? Does everything need to be shared with everybody in the organization? Maybe, maybe not. So let me move ahead here, where we're talking about roles and privileges and student names. This is talking about avoiding using personally identifiable information, PII, for students, because you don't want to have necessarily some of the information going out with student names or email addresses or anything like that about students out to the outside world. So you're setting your profiles so that they're generic, and you're setting the information so that it doesn't include PII in it. But then when you're starting to share, okay, do I flood everybody with everything? Maybe, maybe not. Here's some example groups in a school organization. You could have one for all of the students, or maybe the service club, or the 6th grade, or the student council, or science teachers, or Spanish 1A, 1B, 1C. You can have all kinds of groups inside your organization. Now, that's important because the groups are going to contain people and items. They're collections, they're organizers. Each group is going to have its own set of properties, and people and items can be in multiple groups. And groups can invite users from other organizations beyond. I'm working on a school project and I want to work with that teacher from that school and that teacher from that school, but they've got different organizations. How do we collaborate? Well, we can work with people from the outside organization. That's what we're really trying to emphasize here, is that when you understand how the system works well, whether it's making maps or looking at data or working with the organization, you can take advantage of the powers and make sure that you don't fall in traps. So these elements of the data, the information, are going to feed how people work with this through searching, through gathering, making sure that we find the right item, using it, taking advantage of it, recording. These are the things that we have used. So when we want to make something, boy, I used that layer. I really love that layer. I know it was in my map that I created for this special project. I'm going to find that project by looking for the tag, look down the lines. I can find that layer. I can follow the tag. All of these pieces fit together to make your operation more efficient, more powerful. So this document, this ArcGIS Online Orgs for Schools document, is a really useful one, and we're going to have the URL for it at the in the closing session, and maybe it's time for that right now. So let me get back to, here we are. What have we done? We've been talking about metadata. Joseph even used that phrase, I never metadata I didn't like. That was great, Joseph. The URLs. If you don't pay attention to the URLs, start looking at them as you're working your way through. As I think Tom and Joseph and Kylie mentioned, there's that 32 character ID string that is up at the top. That piece is magic. And then you can start paying attention and looking at it as, well, there's little bits and pieces. Well, let's keep going here. Item IDs, item pages, tags, searching, groups, all of these things. That's what we did in this hour. And now, I knew this was coming up here. The metadata enables these informed decisions, and it's what powers the apps that you're using. It's what allows them to engage the right elements. And these URL components that you saw, Kylie broke down that nice long string where you got the org, you've got the mode that it is. Was that maps or was that hub? How is the data being treated? And then you've got something about the ID field. So look at the URLs, because they're going to be informative for you. The more information, the more you're able to use information, the better your experience is going to be with GIS. Those item IDs, sometimes as you're working with a story map and you want to engage something, it's going to say, give me the ID number for this. Sometimes people contact me and say, I've got a problem and I can't open up something. And I say, give me the ID string for your map or your layer. These ID strings are crucial. The item pages, you're going to be relying on those things a lot. When the students who are working on the high school and middle school competition put these things together and we're judging them, we really pay attention to, did they do a good job in their documentation? Did it talk about what they've got in there? How is it organized? Where did it come from? Can I see tags in there? This is such a universal skill, this ability to present data, to prepare the data, to document the data. so that other people can take advantage of it. If all you were concerned about was for yourself, then you could have your own special kind of information page. But all of GIS is about sharing and bringing the capacities of other people together. And it's this metadata that makes it all possible. It's what makes searching possible. And that universal skill we really need to rely on. And finally, you start thinking about who are we going to work with in different kinds of projects. And you may be in an organization with dozens or even hundreds of groups, and each group has special characteristics to it. Okay, so some resources from this class, from the k12.maps.arcgis.com. Hey, that's the K12 org that you're in. Remember, you can create, save maps, add metadata, and share into the org's mapping hour group. What if you're in an org that you don't have a login into the mapping hour org, but you can find that group, find a group, just look for the phrase mapping hour, look for a group out in public ArcGIS Online mapping hour. That'll be our group. You'll see that little special purple logo there. That's our group. You can share things from your outside organization into that group. You can join that group. And then, if you want some examples of what it is that students have done with working with all of these capacities, take a look at the ArcGIS Online high school and middle school competition for the US students from 2017, 2018, 2019. The 2020 competition is still underway. People are still working on it. It's racing toward a close in the school year. And in the mapping hour zone, that's where you can find the other videos from the previous sessions. Do that survey. If you are just joining us now and you need a login, do the survey and seek a login. Now, from classic K-12 resources, here's this ArcGIS Online Orgs for Schools. There's the URL. That document will walk you through a lot of the things that you should know about your organization, even if you're just working inside it and you're not managing it. It's really helpful to take advantage of. Now, a lot of this was about metadata, and there's a wonderful set of activities that are sitting out as they're sitting out as part of the learn.arcgis.com zone. And this is the Teach with GIS group. There are some teachers who have been putting together some content, storing it in a sort of a little subset of that. And you can, here's the short URL to get to that zone. And one of our favorite teachers put together an activity that is looking at image resolution versus ground accuracy. And the way they do it is just looking at the metadata about the layers of information that are in that map. You go through and you'll see it's a nice, neat, short activity, and you can do it even without being logged in. You can look at this thing and work your way through it. It's a great lesson. Now, if you decided that, wow, this was so much fun, I got to have a bunch of lessons to go through, there is at esri.com/training. That's where the training site is for Esri as a company. The organization, the people who are using this out in industry and government and everything, they go take courses online from the training site all the time. And you can too, if your login is Esri enabled. Where do I read about Esri enabled? And the Orgs for Schools doc. That's where you can read about Esri enabled. So you need to have a login to take a course It can be a generic login to take a course. And this is a set of classes that takes about 6 hours to go through. It's 5 different classes that total up to about 6 hours to go through them. So you can go in and take a look, and it's walking through a lot of the stuff that we've been exploring here right now. And this training plan, learning plan, it's called, 5 courses, you can click on that link and it'll take you right to it. But it's going to say, go ahead and start logging in, and you'll want to have your login ready to do that. If you read the educator document that is there on that front page of a suggestion for you, you'll see how you as a teacher can have your students do that without needing to log in. There's a clever trick. Now, we're done with 5 sessions. What have we done? What have we looked at? We've looked at ArcGIS Online, this whole cloud-based infrastructure for mapping and analyzing data. ArcGIS.com, that's the address where you can do some mapping without being logged in. You can just go in and map like we did for the first 3 sessions, or with a login. This whole issue of online mapping, so much power built into online mapping, both the 2D side and the 3D side of it. It's so powerful. Getting people to do this is changing the world. It's changing the world. For people to be able to see information, you can be a part of that. You get to do this more powerfully when you start to understand how it works. You see the world differently because of that. And when you create things and save them and share them with others, you're changing the world too. But people won't know it without being able to rely on that magical metadata. 5 sessions down, 15 to go. We look forward to seeing you for the next 5. Thanks, everybody. Great session. Bye-bye.